In this lesson, we'll look at how we use overflow to restrict the amount of information displayed vertically within an element on our page. Up until now, as we've been adding content to our pages, we haven't cared how much space was taken vertically by that space. But there may be circumstances where you wish to restrict the amount of information that is displayed without deleting the information from the page. Overflow gives us a mechanism for controlling the amount of space taken up by the content on our page. Let's take a look at how we do this. In the Project Files folder, in Chapter 8, I'm going to open both the lesson_05_home.htm and accompanying CSS file in TextEdit, and I'll do so by dragging the file onto the TextEdit icon, perhaps Notepad on the PC. And I'm going to also drag my HTML file onto my Firefox icon on my desktop to launch that file in Firefox. And we see a file that looks very much like what we were working on in our previous lessons. Now, on the right-hand side of the page, we can see that we have what we've been referring to as a side content div, that being a div tag with an ID attribute, referencing an ID named side content, which positions this element and the contents of that element on the right-hand side of the page. Now we can see that this side content element pushes past the main content of the page. We might like to trim this up a little bit so that there's not this big, huge space underneath the main content and above the footer at the bottom of our page. So what I'm going to do is put my web browser over on the right-hand side of my screen so that I can tile my HTML file and my CSS file up on the screen at the same time so I can make modifications to my code. Now I'm going to locate the ID that governs my side content, which I can see here in my layout and formatting group of CSS rules, and we can see that we use the float property to get the side content to be positioned on the right-hand side of the page. Now we're going to add two properties, each of which will have their own value, which will modify the way that the side content is presented. The property that we want to add, which I'll add on a new line, is called overflow. And for the moment, I'll just set the overflow value to hidden. And the other property we want to work with, which I'll add on a new line, is called height. And I'll assign a value of 400 pixels as an example. Now, what we're doing with these two properties and values is telling the browser with the height property that we want our side content div to be 400 pixels tall. And with our overflow property, we're telling the browser to take any contents that span within the side content div beyond 400 pixels tall and ignore that content. Just don't show it. Hide it. That's what the hidden value is doing. So let's take a look and see what this looks like. We should see the side content div 400 pixels tall and everything beyond 400 pixels tall hidden. So from the File menu, I'll select Save, switch over to my browser and reload, and I'll scroll down a bit, and sure enough, the side content div is now 400 pixels tall. In this side content div, I had the list of the 8 or 9 planets, depending on how you feel about Pluto, and I duplicated that list twice. And you can see that you can only see the very, very top of the word Jupiter, which is down here underneath the word Mars, but you can't see any other information. You can't see Saturn, Neptune, etc. But if you view your source, which we can see under the View menu by bringing up Page Source, the list of headings is complete. Only not all of the headings are being displayed. These last 4 headings inside this paragraph element are being hidden. So I'll close down my source code now, and I'll switch back over to TextEdit because I want to look at a slightly more useful implementation of the overflow property. Hidden is not the only value that we can provide to overflow. We can also provide a value of scroll. Now, when I assign a value of scroll, and then save my file, and switch back over to my web browser. And I'm going to make my web browser a little bit wider and smaller again, just so I can see that that content is hidden. And now if I hit reload, I can see that that side content div has now changed. If you look closely, on the right-hand side of the side content div, where there wasn't anything before, now there is a scroll bar. Much like the scroll bar on our browser itself, this side content div now has its own scroll bar, which allows us to span the contents of this div at will, which is much more convenient than just hiding contents.